Mike and Virginia Chevalier are not only diehard Broncos fans, but they've supported DNVR for a long time as DNVR members, and they're a husband and wife team with over 15 years of financial services experience. Visit them at dnvrmortgage.com and enter to win a free shirt or hat from DNVR when you do. Most importantly, get set up for a free consultation to discuss all of your options. That's dnvrmortgage.com. Since your home is likely to be one of your largest assets and your mortgage your largest debt, they believe it's vital to consider your full financial picture when purchasing a home. This includes considering your short-term and long-term planning goals, your investments, and your tax situation. Mike and Virginia will work tirelessly to find you the best loan for your situation. So visit them at dnvrmortgage.com or call at 303-257-6578. That's Michael Chevalier, NMLS number 1931006. And Virginia Chevalier, NMLS number 1910631.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. Two goes out to Zach, Mace, RK, and the bar. Three for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Number four, we're still waiting for. Well, bring on Chase. Out on the field, a mile high, Broncos win is our desire. Couple with a breakfast crew and a friend, bleed orange and blue till the bitter end. Come and join us at the DNVR. We are DNVR.
Victory Monday. Love to see it. Victory Monday on the DNVR Broncos podcast. And of course, Victory Monday and every other DNVR Broncos podcast is presented by MSU Denver Online. Time and time again, the one thing that will protect you against economic downturns is an education allowing you to adapt into varying careers. So go and build your toolbox at MSU Denver. MSU Denver Online puts a dynamic education at your fingertips without forcing you to decide between earning a degree and living your life. It is the Colorado institution providing rigorous and affordable online programs taught by professors to bring the real world into the classroom. 750 classes, 40-plus hybrid programs, all sorts of different stuff at MSU Denver Online. So head on down there and further that education.
My boys, what's up? Happy Victory Monday. Man, it feels good to be a Broncos fan today, I bet. And after the Broncos come off a big-time upset that really no one saw coming.
Yeah, and no one saw that coming, Zach. A new plant.
Yeah, this one has been thriving in the shower where it gets all the humidity and stuff. So I'm babying this one so that it can stay alive. So it only comes out here for the special occasions of the live pod.
See, that's the thing. You've got to be sure that it's only making limited appearances here, because I think the problem with the last one was you just left it there. For whatever reason, plant life can't thrive in the Peyton Manning memorabilia corner. And it's sad. I mean, I guess it's just, does the sun never get over there? Is there no photosynthesis going on? What's the deal with that corner?
Yeah, exactly. You said it. No photosynthesis happening in this corner.
Classic Peyton soaking up all of the limelight.
Oh,
it is a Victory Monday, which are nice to have around here. For sure. And I went back and watched a bit of the film this morning, and I wanted to see how Drew Lock did on play action. And man, it was just as good as I thought it was. Drew ended up going on play action. Let me get the exact numbers here. 8 for 11, 89 yards, good enough, 73% completions. That is good enough for a 96.4 passer rating. And it got me to thinking, did Pat Shurmur finally figure out a formula that works for Drew Lock? Because when I went back and watched it, I obviously noticed it when it happened in the game too, but I thought that the play action pass in which they came out in pistol, which I had been pounding the table for all year, was an indication to me that Pat Shurmur was setting a little bit of stubbornness aside and going back to what he thought worked for Drew Lock last year, because that's the first time we've seen a pistol formation all year, at least since week 1. I can't remember if it was in week 1. At least, so it's the first time we've seen it since Drew Lock's been back on the field post injury. And I thought, okay, maybe they finally have a formula here. You know, you got a couple play action bootlegs where Drew Lock just got to dump it off to the tight ends, and they picked up significant yardage on those. So what do you guys think? Did they start to figure out a formula for success for Drew Lock?
Yeah, but this isn't rocket science that we're talking about. We're talking about play actions. We're talking about getting Drew Lock on the move, and we know that is where he's done well. And you know what? He did well with it yesterday, and what it does is it helps him in his development as a quarterback, because it breaks the field in half and it only gives him 1 or 2 reads, and then he can take off. And we saw him take off a couple of times yesterday in not easy situations, and he made it work. So yes, that is a formula that we can see from Drew Lock. And hopefully it's something we see moving forward, because again, this is not, brain surgery that the Broncos just discovered. It's a very simple thing.
Yeah, it's a formula that can work, I think, to kind of just get him back on his feet and start to rebuild his confidence. I mean, what was your tweet, RK, early in the game after the interception? What was the way you described Drew Lock?
I said he looks permanently rattled or something along those lines.
Right. And clearly he was rattled. Things were in his head. And we've even just seen in Drew Lock in his press conferences the last few weeks, kind of that swagger, that confidence, it's gone away. So how do you rebuild that? You start by kind of propping him back up a little bit, giving him a game plan that plays to his strengths, that helps him out with a balanced attack. So that means play action. But then beyond that, for the Broncos offense as a whole, that means they've got to run the ball and they've got to stick with running it. You can't have, even if you're behind 17-6, 20-6 in the second or third quarter of a game, that could be the Saints game, the Chiefs game, or others, you have to stick with this game plan. You can't abandon it and start trying to rely on Drew Lock being able to throw you out of a bind willy-nilly. You've got to maintain fidelity with this philosophy until he gets to the point where he can start, maybe seeing the whole field a little bit better. So this is a stop the bleeding moment for him. It's something he can build off of, but it's not where he needs to go. But in the moment, all you're trying to do is get him out of the funk that he was in, and that's why this worked.
Yeah, and I think it's a little more than that, though. I mean, I think that things like going out of the pistol, that wasn't a half field read for Drew. That was a full field read. It wasn't a rollout. That's just getting him into a rhythm. And I think rhythm is the one thing that Pat Shurmur. That's my biggest critique of Pat Shurmur was the way that they started the game. There wasn't anything necessarily easy out there for Drew Lock early in the game. I would have loved to see them start the game on one of those little rollout dump offs that he hit a few times throughout the game for several yards. Because I always say it, you got to let Drew Lock see the ball go through the net. And yesterday was the most classic example of that. He starts 0 of 6 with an interception. He finally sees the ball go through the net on the 3rd and 10 completion to KJ Hamler. Great catch by KJ, by the way. And he rolls off 7 consecutive completions after he finally gets that one. So he goes from 0 for 6 to 7 for 13 in a heartbeat, and the Broncos are threatening to score, and then they do score. So that's my one critique of Pat Shurmur, or my biggest critique of Pat Shurmur yesterday, is didn't help Drew Lock get going early. But I think you can use some of these things that you learned yesterday in the future to get Drew Lock going earlier, to get him out on the move, to get him just an easy dump off to Noah Fant that turns into 29 yards like it did one time for the Broncos yesterday. So I do think that it was a step in the right direction for Drew, and it was also a step in the right direction for Pat Shurmur in terms of working with Drew and knowing what works for Drew.
Yeah, and the running game is a massive part of this, because you know what you can't do? You can't pull the defense up on a little play action in the pistol if you're not running the ball successfully. Defenses won't bite when you do a fake handoff and then turn that into a play action. Defenses won't bite on that, and then you may have Drew on the move with just nowhere to throw it, nowhere to run. So the run game has to work with this. So it's going to be interesting when the run game doesn't work. Do we continue to see Pat Shurmur do this into the second quarter, after halftime, into the third quarter? Or is it very basic, just shotgun? He's sitting there having to go through 5 progressions. And we haven't seen that Drew is able to consistently do that successfully. So what happens then? Because this team is built to run the ball. But even if a team's built to run the ball, you're not always going to be successful. So is that maybe why we've only seen Pat Shurmur had success with this formula a couple of times, is because either the run game doesn't work or Pat Shurmur freaks out and thinks that the run game's not working, so he abandons it? I totally agree with Mace that you can't abandon it. But at what point do you have to abandon it? Because the defensive end is just crashing on Drew Lock every time he's moving. And then at that point, you do have to change things.
Yeah, but you wait as long as possible before changing it. I think back to a team I covered a dozen years ago, the Panthers in 08. They had a veteran quarterback in Jake Delhomme, but he's a veteran quarterback that is kind of as much known for his mistakes as the things that he did right. And they had 2 very good running backs in D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. And sometimes they'd fall behind. I remember one game against Arizona in the regular season. They're behind 17-3. Kurt Warner's passing all over them. And they stick with what they do. They're getting towards the end of the second quarter. The game is starting to fall out of reach. But I think it was on first down, they hand off, and second down, they go play action. And eventually they wore down the Cardinals and won that game. That's the sort of thing that I want to see going forward. There's a point at which you can say, okay, we got to adjust out of this. We've got to do some different things and maybe put more on Drew Lock's shoulders in terms of reading the entire field more often than he was. But I think the Broncos are reaching that point too early in games, and I think they got to trust themselves. If it's 20-6 in the middle of the third quarter, you can still play your game and get out of it. You still have time. Trust yourselves, trust the game plan, and trust the fact that you're playing to the strengths of your team.
So I have to ask, Mace, what is the breaking point? Because I agree with you. It was They gave up on it way too early last week against the Raiders. Way too early. 20-6 in the middle of the third quarter. Broncos have the ball. Yeah, I agree with you. They should stick with that. But is it 20-6 at the beginning of the fourth quarter? What is the breaking point? Because I think we all agree that last week was way too early. But I think we also agree that if you're down 14 points, you probably can't be just smashing the run if there's 4 minutes left in the game.
I would say that the breaking point is rough. If I'm just thinking of it in my head off the cuff, it's probably the point where you can't have a multiple 4-minute drive. So like, let's say this, if 12 minutes to go and you're behind by 21 and you would need 3-4-minute drives just to tie, at that point, that's not what you're doing isn't going to work.
Yep.
Something like that. So you kind of have a little bit of an equation in your head that says, okay, at this point, we have to shift out of what is our normal strength and do something different.
I would say it's 5 minutes per score that you're down. So you're down 3 scores. So then that's 15 minutes. That's the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Like, you abandon it in the fourth quarter. If you're down 2 scores and it's inside 10 minutes, you obviously have to crank up the pass a little bit more. But it's definitely like if it's a attainable game in the third quarter, you honestly don't have to abandon the run. You want to be in a position, where you have your timeouts and you're able to make it a 1-score game with enough time to get a stop, use all 3 of your timeouts, and get around 2 minutes with the ball back. You a lot of times you see the teams who make these comebacks, end up having a kind of long drive in the fourth quarter that gets it down, inside 3 minutes. But they get that touchdown to make it a 1-score game, and you think, oh man, they're going so slow. But there's 2:40 left on the clock. They bang 3 timeouts. They get the ball back with 2 minutes. They go down and score. So, I think that's what it is. 5 minutes per score before you abandon the run.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And that's kind of good thing for Pat Shurmur to know, because you don't have to freak out in the third quarter if things aren't going your way. What happens if you abandon that is you get multiple interceptions for your young quarterback. And that obviously really, really hurts. But the running game's got to be going. And the offensive line yesterday, guys, was absolutely phenomenal. In the run game, they were creating huge holes for both Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon. And also in the pass protection, Drew Lock was not under pressure, didn't get sacked yesterday. Those guys stepped up. And is Blake Westbecker chimes in on here. Having Dotson back was huge. And yes, it was. They did not have to worry about right tackle. Graham Glasgow did not play the entire game. You had Austin Schlottman in there for 10 plays, and you didn't even notice. Those guys were good. Dalton Reisner probably played his best game. And, of course, Garrett Bowles was just a bulldozer out there.
Yes, he was. And, guys, the most impressive stat of this game for me in terms of a team stat is this one. Drew Lock, 0 sacks for 0 yards. That is a huge tip of the cap to the offensive line, to the running backs in pass protection, and to Drew himself for avoiding pressure. All week we're saying, man, you put an injured Drew Lock out there against this team that loves their crazy blitz dial-ups, and you're going to get him killed back there. Well, they didn't. They did a great job of keeping him off the turf. He definitely got hit a couple times, but for that team, to go out there and hold the Dolphins to 0 sacks, I think is a huge testament to the entire offense. Great job by them, and again, it's just another little step in the right direction for the offense. For the last few weeks, we've been talking about untouched blitzers. I didn't see that once yesterday, except for on a bootleg where, the contain just blitzed the quarterback. But other than that, you never saw an untouched guy running free at Drew Lock.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that was just how many guys that you were keeping in for protection. We saw more 2 tight end sets, even some 3 tight end sets. We saw more of that than we've experienced over the course of the season. And so a lot of times you're talking about Troy Fumagalli and Nick Van Nett staying in to help protect Drew Lock. And then, of course, you had Melvin Gordon who was involved in some pass protection as usual. But I think kind of throttling it back and going with more heavier sets on the offense, it gave you an extra blocker. And also, look how they were using the tight ends. You often saw the tight ends lined up as kind of an H-back in the backfield, not quite a fullback, but that's something that put them in position to where if they have to pick up the pass rush, if they have to be involved in pass pro, it's easy for them positionally to do that. And so I think that was a key as well. And again, it's not going to be fancy. You'd love to, watch fireworks and things open up down the field with 3 wide sets, but 3 wide sets just aren't what works for this offense right now.
Yeah, they are not what works for this offense. Pretty much all the interceptions and sacks come from 3 wide. That doesn't work. And to maybe the stat of the game is coupling the 0 sacks Drew had with the 6 sacks that the Broncos defense had. Drew had an encouraging game yesterday. The offense in general, I thought, had a very good game yesterday, but the defense had a fantastic game yesterday. You pair all of that together, and guys, we're speaking of formulas today. That is the formula that John Elway wanted with this team, was a great defense that wins games and has an offense that does just enough, where it rides on the running game shoulders, not the quarterback shoulders. And that is how John Elway wanted to develop Drew Lock, was by not putting a lot on his shoulders and maybe giving him a little more every couple of weeks. This should not turn into a 5 wide set offense next week, but then seeing if Drew can slowly progress with that.
Yeah. QBR is one of the stats that has been really low on Drew Lock in his bad games and has been high on him in his good games. And this one grades out pretty darn well for QBR. He ends up with 73.5, which is good enough for the 9th best quarterback in the NFL this week. Right surrounded by Ben Roethlisberger, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Phillip Rivers, right in a group with those guys. And then just to highlight how good the Broncos defense did against Tua, with a 26.5 QBR all the way down one spot behind Joe Flacco. So all the way down at the bottom, 22 overall or close to the bottom. It just shows that, when you put Drew Lock in the right situations, he's not having unblocked blitzers, smacking him in the face all game. He can be a very good and useful quarterback in the NFL.
And the thing is just going to be consistency. And that's why it's nice that these final 7 games, that there's 7 of them, now we have 6 of them, need to see it consistently. And that will kind of help with only having 5 games last year. It'll show that he's overcoming the slow start this year. And it'll be 6 or 7 good games to end the season. That's what we need to see.
Now, let me ask you guys this, though. Let's say Drew Lock has performances like this the rest of the season where they're kind of, scheming to help him out. What do you think the Broncos' plan should be in the offseason if the next 6 games look like the one we just watched?
If he keeps putting out, top 10 QBR, 70 QBR, 73 QBR games, I think they're going to move forward with him. Obviously, you want to see more touchdowns, but touchdowns are, circumstantial a lot of the time. And you definitely don't want to see the interception early in the game. But at least with the interception, it did happen early. And Drew was able to build, away from that and put it together after that. So I think if you see games like that, and obviously the touchdowns are going to change. And maybe there's more interceptions some games, maybe there's more touchdowns some games. But in general, that type of performance and the Broncos are in football games, I think they're going to roll forward with him.
Well, if we see, I'm taking the 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, 70 QBR in terms of his performance yesterday, and saying if he does that the rest of the way, then it'll show me that the Broncos aren't trusting Drew. And I think that will show a lot because they didn't, like we said yesterday, they didn't throw the ball in the red zone. They did not take shots into the end zone. That can be smart in a quarterback's progression. But if you're never letting him go, I think that would speak volumes as well. So I do need to see that more touchdowns. I mean, we're talking about a quarterback that's thrown 5 interceptions in the past 2 games and 1 touchdown. I certainly need that to change. But I do like the way Drew handled himself. But I do think that we need to see him do a little more and just take steps every week. Yesterday was a very good step in the right direction, but we need to see more steps.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think of what they did yesterday, a run and play action heavy game plan. And it was similar to some of the stuff that Pat Shurmur did in Minnesota back in 2017 with Case Keenum. And it got the best out of Case Keenum. But the Vikings made the decision that they wanted to go in another direction. So I think if there are more games like this, I think Drew Lock is the starter in 2021. But I think the Broncos have brought in a Sam Darnold type of hedge on Drew Lock.
I think so too.
I don't think it'll be Sam Darnold, but I could definitely see them bringing in another quarterback who is definitely better than Jeff Driscoll or Brett Rippon. But it'll be interesting to see, like I said, I think the most important part is the trend continuing in the right direction. And if Drew Lock continues having games like that, QBR isn't the perfect stat, but I think in this case it kind of illuminates that he was good enough for the Broncos to win. Not exactly special, but certainly not a deterrent. I think if he continues doing games like that, and again, yeah, you want to see him throw touchdowns, but if Melvin Gordon's going to eat up touchdowns in the red zone, you're not going to complain about that. So he can't throw 0 touchdowns the rest of the way, obviously. But if he continues having games like that, I think the Broncos are going to have him be the starting quarterback next year.
And I think we'll find out a lot of what the Broncos think with him down the stretch. Do they start letting him go a little more? Because he had the ultimate game manager game yesterday, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. After that first interception, which is something you can't discount, he went 70% completion the rest of the game after starting 0 for 6. He threw for 209 yards before that lob at the end of the game. That is the ultimate game manager game, but it's doing what the Broncos asked him to do. So I don't say that in a bash at all. But guys, last night we saw Derek Carr and Patrick Mahomes absolutely light it up. We saw Justin Herbert have a very good game yesterday. you got to have more than just a game manager in the NFL right now, and especially in this division. So again, I'm not trying to be down on Drew at all, but I just think that we need to continue to see steps, and it has to build off yesterday's performance.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to take steps forward, and finally they got one yesterday. They finally got one, and really it wasn't just the numbers that I thought Drew improved on. He improved in reading the field yesterday. He improved in stepping up in the pocket yesterday. He looked finally comfortable for the first time, and that definitely has something to do with the pass protection and also the scheme as well. So a good team effort from everyone that's involved in what the final stats look like for Drew Lock.
And Drew made one terrible decision yesterday. It was a really bad pick. But outside of that, we're not talking about how there were 2 or 3 dropped interceptions and really bad mistakes that he made. So definitely, he passed the eye test as well.
Yeah, the biggest mistake he might have made ended up being a 61-yard completion in the rest of the game.
Yep, exactly.
It was a dime, though. I kind of hope that he can learn a little something from that. That's the most arc I've seen him put on a deep ball all year, and it ended up in his receiver's hands. He's often talked about how he likes to get his deep balls. I think the terms he uses is low and inside. Got to get it a little higher. Or else he's just going to keep sailing it over guys like Jerry Jeudy. But again, step in the right direction. Maybe next week is when he hits a deep ball up the seam. He had KJ Hamler on one that would have been a really nice play. So, you need to see those steps.
Isn't that crazy that yesterday the worst part of Drew's game outside of the pick was his deep ball accuracy? It just was not there at all. That I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, he's up and down in that area. And I think it might be another one where he just needs to hit one to get going a little, and maybe that one to Tim Patrick late can be one that helps him get going a little bit because you see it happen in all other aspects of his game. Once he once he gets one over the middle, he starts to feel it a little better, starts to see it a little better. It could be a good lesson that you don't have to have Cortland Sutton out there just to throw it up. Literally, just bomb it up in the air and see if your 6'4" Tim Patrick could come down with it. Or Jerry Jeudy. Last time a ball was sailed toward Jerry Jeudy, it was from Brett Rippon, and he pulled it right out of the Jets' hands.
Even though it was under.
We're a little shoddy there with Mace. That's not a Victory Monday.
No, it looks like a week ago.
It does look like a week ago. We'll hopefully get Mace back here in a second when his connection reestablishes. Zach, what else stood out to you from that game and from an offensive perspective that you want to see more of going forward?
This balance between the running backs. Ryan, like I said yesterday, everyone in Colorado wants to see Phillip Lindsay get 30-plus carries a game. That's not going to happen. Multiple coaching staffs have told you that. And in fact, the best we saw from Phil this year, a career high 23 carries, probably not going to see that again when Melvin Gordon is still playing with Phil. But this was how it was supposed to be. 16 carries for one, 15 for the other. They both have 80 yards, both averaging over 5 yards per carry. Melvin was hitting holes well. They were both making big plays. They were both getting the couple yards you needed when you needed them at the time. This was how it was supposed to look. It didn't really look, you couldn't tell who was in the game because they were both just running the ball so well. That is what the Broncos wanted. That is what John Elway wanted. And just being realistic, that's the best way for this team moving forward, is getting those guys 30 combined touches every single game. We can't have this like we had the past 2 weeks where 1 week it was like 11 combined touches, and against the Raiders it was like 15 combined touches. It got to be 30.
Yeah, the last 4 games, Zach, 26, 14, 14, and 15 carries.
Yep.
Combined.
For the two of them, yeah.
Combined for the two of them. 17.3 per game. That's not going to work. Yesterday, you're getting the two of them the ball 31 times on the ground. That's what you want to see. I'd say probably the bare minimum is 26. but preferably you want them to be at least 30 together and have it look just like that. If they're both hitting on some shots and they both had explosive runs yesterday, you do want it to look close to 50-50 like it did for the two of them.
Yeah. And guys, it's crazy that it was a 58-yard field goal of mine that they were both going to have double-digit catches. That should never be a 58-yard field goal or touches. That should be a little chip shot every single week.
Wait, RK, what was your 58-yard field goal? Because Zach got his. I got mine with the Justin Simmons pick just in the nick of time there at the end of the game. What did you have?
Mine was that Brandon McManus would have an attempt at the record, which he did not get.
Well, you know what? If Mace's doesn't come true and Justin gets the pick or doesn't get the pick and the chart or the Dolphins score, maybe we are talking about a 65-yard kick at the end of the game.
I much prefer the way that it went. I don't need. No one needed to see that touchdown score for the Dolphins there. All right. Well, I think that was a good conversation. So we're going to wrap things up here on the live side of things. Move over to the podcast format. If you watched and enjoyed on YouTube, we'd love if you hit us with a thumbs up on this video. That helps us get in front of more eyes. But we're going to jump over to the podcast side where you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just search Broncos. We're the first one that comes up. Slight flex. All right, we'll talk to you guys in a bit.